böyle şükürler eyle. Eşkime aç kucağını, şükürler eyle. Elleşme göyle, ters olma böyle, şükürler eyle.
Sensiz gülşenim puç olar, duy bu gerçeği. Sensiz gülşenim puç olar, duy bu gerçeği. Duy bu gerçeği, ay gülüm çöller gerçeği, duy bu gerçeği, gülüm çöller göçeği. Sen beni mest eyleyirsen inci çiçeği, sen beni mest eyleyirsen inci çiçeği. Naz eylesen el ataram erfendi feylen, elleşme göyle şükürler eyle, ters olma böyle. Eşkine aç kucağını, şükürler eyle, elleşme göyle, ters olma böyle, şükürler eyle. Sen el ataram erfendi feyle, elleşme göyle, ters olma böyle, şükürler eyle. Eşkime aç kucağını, şükürler eyle, elleşme göyle, ters olma böyle, şükürler eyle. Elleşme göyle, ters olma böyle, şükürler eyle.
Una mattina mi son svegliato, oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. Una mattina mi son svegliato e ho trovato l'invasore. Oh partigiano, portami via, oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. Partigiano, portami via, che mi sento di morire. E se io muoio da partigiano, oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. E se io muoio da partigiano, tu mi devi seppellire lassù in montagna. Oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. Mi seppellire lassù in montagna, sotto l'ombra d'un bel fiore. Прощай, родная, вернусь не скоро. О, бella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. Я на рассвете уйду с отрядом гарибальдийских партизан. Отряд укроют родные горы. О, bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. Прощай, родная, вернусь не скоро. Не легок путь у партизан. Нам будет трудно, я это знаю. О, bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. За свободу родного края мы будем драться до конца. И за свободу родного края мы будем драться до конца. Ciao!
Allora, intanto buongiorno a tutti, un ringraziamento agli organizzatori per questa occasione così importante, così originale all'interno delle celebrazioni per il 7° centenario della della morte di Dante. Vedo anche, saluto Carlo Saccone, e do immediatamente la parola a Aydin.
And also an event dedicated to
Aspettate, qui
Hello.
Aydin Talibzadeh della Azerbaijan State University of Culture and Arts.
These is arranged by, he's the representative of the University of Culture and Art of Azerbaijan, and he's gonna make presentation
Hermeneutic, modus,
the elements of on the artistic and philosophical and illustrative models, hermeneutical mentality style in Nizami's Xəmsə, the 5 great poems. So with that, I give the floor to the speaker, Aydin Talibzadeh. It's my pleasure to welcome the participants of the event. Like it was mentioned earlier, we're going to speak about philosophical and illustrative model of the 5 pillars of Nizami's Xəmsə. So the first part is the various effects. The 5th is the bar effect. So my article was published and based on the 5 major concepts of Nizami. Why Khamsa? Why 5 epic poems? In the world Nizami studies, it is considered that it is believed that his letter was collected and named Khamsa, which means 5 poems. Then the second question arises: if we consider him a universal genius in linguistics, in philosophy, in Greek philosophy, in whatever, in astronomy, then why did Nizami, was he unaware of the 5 great poems? How could the followers bring them together and publish them in the 5 great poems? And the question is, if Nizami is aware of that, why did he never write anything after Iskandername that was penned in 1294? So he still could create something. I made the conclusion that Nizami actually was aware of his 5 poems, and to put it more into a scientific language, Khamsa was an epistemic of Nizami's creativity, and it covered the most important issues in a logic way. Knowingly, Nizami was moving towards the 5 great poems, and it was based on the religious and moral values of Islam and as interpretations towards them, and how it came to being. Then you may say, yes, while Nizami is delivering the idea of Khamsa, did he get this idea himself? The main impulse and the standing point, the basic point of my idea is that he found it in the 5 basic pillars of Islam. Why? In Islam, Islam is understood as the unity of the five pillars: Afani Shariati, Al Kami, Al Khamsa. Well, this idea is very important in itself. I'm not going to go into the depth of it. I will just convey some basic. This first poem is the Treasury of Mysteries, is based on the first pillar of Islam, which Ash-Shahada, At-Tawheed, which is unity, the idea of Ash-Shahada, At-Tawheed ideas, means the singleness and the unity of God and Muhammad being the prophet. And there were 124 prophets before him. So this idea is duly reflected in the Treasury of Mysteries. And we try to provide social analysis of Treasury of Mysteries only through the prism of principles of social justice. And only in this plane we try to understand it. Whereas Nizami's idea was to underline the beauty of the divine forces and the harmony of divine harmony. Where did I get this idea? And in the first part of my article, I called it the rose. While starting working at the Treasure of Mysteries, I said that rose is the blood of the earth. It actually brings the essence of the earth, and the idea is shown in a permanent way. So it comes to the idea of wisdom when the rose turns into a tool of earth, when one of the sages smells the rose and dies from its scent because he has no belief. In fact, the rose is a cipher. In a way, what does this idea come from? In Sufism, the rose is associated with Prophet Muhammad. Then its petals, it looks like M in Arabic. And when you take a look at the shape of a rose, it has the shape of Arabic Mim letter, which is M, Muhammad. And this idea was taken by Nizami from the Zoroastrian tradition, because there it comes from. And the whole Iranian or Oriental culture has a symbol of horticulture. It's a symbol of gardenery art or horticultural art. And the idea of paradise is associated with rose. On the other hand, Nizami Ganjavi, penning his Treasury of Mysteries, actually, in conclusion of this poem, he says that the world is holding a rose as a piece of flame, as a fire. It's a symbol of flame, which is pretty much associated with Zoroastrian tradition, because oftentimes the flame is portrayed through a rose, and after conducting analysis, there are 5 petals. In Arabic graphics, it is a pentagon. It's a pentacular a pentagon that symbolizes the flame, the fire, portrayed through the rose, and the cipher of the rose is conveying this message. On the other, the Pearl code, it's Khosrow and Shireen. In fact, this is the mirror reflection of the story of Khosrow and Shireen, and it's why do I say that? When uh, I have nothing but prayers, and from the very beginning, the Nizami Ganjavi writing about Khosrow, or Khosrow, so to say, he's in prayers. As long as he is capable to pray, he is a happy man. Khosrow is a happy man for as long as he is capable of delivering his prayers. And each of the beads, each of the pearls is a prayer in itself. The When Khosrow is asleep, he sees Anushirvan in his dream. Shirin, Shahriz, Bahrubat, Vasfartaj. He gives him 4 pearls, and in Tazim part of the book, it's water, fire, air, and earth. So these are the 4 basic pillars of human existence. So Shirin is earth, Shafi is air, and 2 others are water and fire. So you'll say, where does the plural concept come from? Um, the matter is that Khosrow was not Muslim, he was heretic. And when he was talking to Muhammad, he actually decided to adopt one of the Islamic prayers. So as soon as he distorts the harmony of his prayers, his tragedies start from that moment. Shireen, Farhad, and others actually all the beads, all the pearls he had are falling apart. Are the code of Khosrow and Shireen poem is pearl. Pearl is something you have on your neck, like necklace. So when the poems of Nizami starts, they say it's the pearl is something that is gifted by the royal sea. So Parviz um, is actually something that is associated with a necklace, and Pervis is held equal to pearl. And when we start getting into etymology of the name of Nizami, which means systemic, which means straight, Nizam is the one who is piercing the pearl to make a necklace out of it. That's one of the explanations of the name Nizami. One is a post, is fasting, fast, which is found in Layla and Majnun. What does it mean to fast? It means to deny from something. this is the cornerstone of the whole story of Layla and Majnun. And actually, that's why Majnun is living for desert. Well, so it's associated with letter lam, which is al in Arabic. So here I would like to conclude my presentation because I couldn't cover all this 15 pages, 16 pages of my presentation. And if you're interested in that particular issue, I would be able to respond to your questions. Well, I'm with you today. Unfortunately, I won't be able to attend the conference tomorrow, so I haven't presented my whole presentation to save the time limit, but I can get back to the issue tomorrow. Thank you for very interesting ideas you kindly shared. And Andrea Mazzucchi from University of Napoli is going to be the next speaker. He's going to make presentations on Dante's poetry beyond the signs. So with that, I'm pleased to give floor to our next speaker, Andrea Mazzucchi. His topic is Dante's poetry beyond the sign. Once again, 15 minutes is we're at your disposal. Thank you, Marco. I thank all the participants. I'm very pleased to actually partake in the event, colliding the two geniuses like Nizami&Dante and Dante Alighieri, and comparative analysis of their works is always of a great interest. So comparative analysis is always revealing some new facets that were overseen before. So I will try to draw your attention at some of the interesting points and share some common ideas. There were some interesting ideas expressed in the previous presentations in the morning. Maria Ojageri actually mentioned some of the issues about the poetry of Dante that was written in our mother tongue and the input of Dante in shaping the modern Italian language, in making the bridge in between various historic periods. Using vernacular language is very important. Another very important issue in Dante's poetry. So I see that we have various ideas and thoughts expressed on the matter discussed. So the divine comedy still serves a great source of research from the standpoint of grammar, from the standpoint of creativity. It's being taught its various aspects. So it's really good that from time to time we get back to this issue. And with your indulgence, I would like to mention the following fact. I may not tell you anything new. However, the works of this particular work of Dante has a great practical implication to this very day, because as this was mentioned by distinguished Machiavelli, Dante is, I would like to speak about practicalities of his heritage and the value of his legacy for today's generation, so that if we elevate him to a different level, a higher level, we can see a lot of educational motifs in his works. And in fact, these works have the philosophical issues, the divine issues, that are very sensible. So some existentialist ideas may be found in his works, but I would like to elaborate on the main ideas of Dante. That would be the best option for us, because in various contexts, in the process of shaping public opinions, the works of Dante still serve as a great source, and a lot of research was held on that issue. The written ideas of Dante create various ideas, because, as you know, the researchers try to find the moral aspects of his works.
Non si sente l'audio, Andrea.
Potrebbe esserci un'interruzione della connessione.
An interruption in the sound. So the internet failure, there is a kind of internet failure, so the speaker is not heard. The image has frozen, and probably there is a kind of failure in internet communication. So probably once, probably the speaker has to actually re-enter or reload his internet connection. Now it's okay. Now it's okay. Yeah, it was the problem with internet connection. So let's slightly rewind and start from whatever point. With online events, these things happen. Making a long story short, yeah. Once again, the sound is failing. The sound is failing. Audio is working. The Italian interpreter doesn't hear the speaker. No, I hear you. No, now it's fine. Now it's fine. The audibility is good now. Thank you, Alberto.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Okay, let's continue. Dante, if today we touch upon the religious issues, he's in a way a prophetic poet. The expressions and quotes by Dante haven't lost their importance, and they're still valid to this very day. And in fact, his quotes may address the most pressing problems of today's world, and a lot of scientific research was inspired by Dante's quotes. So we therefore find more and more valuable points in further research of Dante's legacy. And from the religious perspective, there are some guidances, some guidelines by Dante, which deal with poverty, with ignorance, with sentiments nurtured by these factors. So finding the sense of life and the value of life, while these issues are all covered in Dante's works. So these ideas are very prominent and clear in Dante's works, and some of them are just taken at the face value. And today, in scientific polemics and disputes, we actually try to find more religious aspects in Dante's works. So by essence, we have various ideas. We have sometimes even well, the everlasting value of his ideas is something that goes without saying, and it also requires further research. And I would like to quote Dante, who said that people dedicate themselves to something and are loyal to something which is a very important ideological postulate. And these are very important factors and aspects that can be found in Dante's works. And it's not only something just purely poetic, it is more of philosophical value. So the dispute between paradise and hell, the correlation between the two, well, is something that is furthermore studied, and the explanation of human relations is found in this correlation. It is also mentioned that well, the value, the force of the word, the power of human word, depending on the environment, may raise to a very high point. And the power of Dante's works is that they deal with human life, and that's where it is nurtured with. And here I would like to note that if any equality ever exists, the Divine Comedy is another step to alleviate or eliminate this inequality, whatever inequality exists to this day. And I would like to say that both scientific and philosophical concepts, attitude towards women, human interrelationships, the way they're presented in the Divine Comedy are to be furthermore researched and studied. So I believe that today it transcends some metaphysical boundaries, and it may actually explain us of further meanings and senses of the concepts that we discuss. So, for instance, the conditions of paradise. So I think that we all have a huge and important mission on us to delve into the meaning of Dante's ideas and to actually revisit the values that are embedded in his works. Whatever language Divine Comedy is published in, it actually conveys this message and shows the development of humankind. And in certain occasions, well, we can see that the various expressions that are used actually are so from this point of view, we can say that Dante managed to create a world of its own. So I think that the message of Dante's works is never outdated. It is an ongoing guidance for all of us. And in a way, irrespective of the linguistic version of the poem, it's a guideline. I only have 1 minute left for my presentation. So what I want to say that if we are conducting these studies and surveys, well, we should feel this a humanistic impact and implication of Dante's works, which are an everlasting source of concepts. There are some verbs and expressions in the poem that actually address the human senses and sentiments, like reinforcement of these values, or inner things that find their way through, and so on and so forth. And there are types of expressions that well, actually ensue from the richness of the language and give us some additional food for thought. Even though the work was penned centuries and centuries ago, it still keeps its value. And there is nothing, well, some points are insulting. I may recall some of the Italian expressions in the poem, which actually are are also important for studies. So in the framework of my presentation, I tried to delve into Dante's poetry and his vocabulary and the words he uses, and actually the expressions he employs. So some of the terms may have special meaning and implications. So the most recent actually interpretations well, are quite numerous, and in some cases he describes his childhood. He touches upon theological aspects, some lyrical passages, and it deals with human senses, human sentiments, and he finds the way to pass it over to convey the message. So this is something that is within the human nature. So I would like to bring another quote here. Which shows the depth of the words and the value of the words and the power of the words. So the people, well, he's using different sexes to actually, convey these messages and passages. Therefore, the language of Dante is the most expressive, and sometimes there are the points that are truly unbelievable, and they actually reverberate with the most important problems of today's life. Thank you, Professor Andrea Mazzucchi. I know that it is a very interesting and debatable issue, and I think that this is something to discuss as well. Now we give the floor to Carlo Caccia, who is gonna elaborate on the imaginative pathway from fire to rocks, a phenomenological analysis of matter in Nizami and Dante's poetry. Welcome. The floor is yours. So, welcome everyone. Thanks to the Azerbaijan and Italian organizers for making it possible for me to partake in this event. If we speak of the images of Nizami and Dante and try to compare them, they have a great symbolic and allegorical meaning and implications. So both the poets are using lots of metaphors which convey very special meanings that are both rich and interesting. In the meantime, these article is actually used by both. I based my article on some methodological issues that are used in the works of both authors. So any are some shaping ideas in the works of every poet. Some of them are studies by philosophers, the others are studied by literarians. So speaking of substantial matter, it prevails in a phenomenal way, and some of the issues are of abstract manner. So from this point of view, the symbolic issues in both Nizami's and Dante's works are of a certain interest. So when we're speaking of symbolic aspects, we try to come up with the issues of fire, earth, water, air, and these all are the ways to reflect the imagination of the authors. Meanwhile, the natural elements employed by Nizami are being compared. For instance, Bahram in Pekar. The story of Bahram and Pekar, it reverberates with Purgatory by Dante, Dante's Purgatory. Purgatoria. In another way, if we compare Nizami with Dante, it's very interesting in the sense that both poets are using certain linguistic, cultural, and philosophical systems. Meanwhile, we shouldn't overlook the aesthetic factors that actually are important and that make their work so interesting. So in very rare cases, you can find the psychological elements. I'm not trying to come up with any hypothesis because they may come into conflict and contradiction with some modern ideas, but the images and interpretation of images of the poets is very important. So if we now analyze the images, the characters, we may find the literary and natural traditions. I would like to pay special attention at these, and sometimes the natural elements would be more important. The fire and earth is more important. I came to the conclusion that there are some debates in this regard, and here we see that the metaphorical meaning are very important. So it comes from the consciousness, human consciousness, and these reflections are pretty much important. So the Swiss
Tutto bene?
Tutto bene, tutto bene.
psychoanalytic and French philosopher, well, they are not colliding with the problem of definition. So it all has a symbolic character, yet they're still trying to find out the special area, and we try to find the basis. So it comes from the internal dynamism, and it has symbolic and contextual elements. So this dynamicism are the precondition for the explanation of the conditions in which the poets live, and so here you can find some similarities. So another important issue is that the formal and imagination, the form and imagination is important, and it is more dealing with visuality. So the psychology moves to the second plan, and the cultural and realistic aspects, well, the substantial imagination is showing some specific aspects, and from this point of view, well, on the other hand, it is more the links with material aspects. And in conclusion, I would like to say that the phenomenological analysis of pre-iconographic level has the merit of providing a possibility of relating to authors geographical and culturally distant, such as Nizami&Dante, by analyzing the fundamental and primordial act of the human beings, which is the enhancing through imagination to create a pathway for experiences. So the analysis of phenomenological relationship with the matter in the works of Nizami&Dante seem to have led to the coexistence in the same works of different dialectics between conceptual polarities concerning the spatial temporal experience of the imaginative act of writing and reading, eternity, verticality, separateness, interior and exterior, just some of the directions that creative free take work of our two authors without establishing close static and schematic imaginative categories such as acknowledge and suggest. So the fire, the earth are shown as and time and space is important in their philosophy. Therefore, we can observe that the two very important works, the five poems and the Divine Comedy, they share some chronotypes. And from this point of view, the fire presented as the symbol of purity is commonly shared, and the values of these elements and these phenomenal features of certain elements may be of a particular importance. And from this point of view, we believe that this purity through fire, purification through fire is very important, and it has some typical issues. So if there is an object that is, if anything is subject to fire, it's prone to purification. So altogether, it indicates that purity and impurity are the element we try to actually reveal in this poetry, and so the threshold presiding over the angel is covered with a diamond stone, symbolizing the loving priority of the gift of forgiveness. In the Divine Comedy by Dante, this is a very important aspect, which all have the element of purification through fire. I think that in Dante's works, it's not that you have more the idea of rationalization, and the poet is trying to actually offer us his experience, and therefore Mariano and Cavalcante, the meeting between Mariano and Cavalcante, the episode is while showing no fear for the sinners. So Nizami and Dante, when we study these their poems, we see that both Nizami and Dante are using fire as a symbol of purification, and we actually with that I would like to conclude my presentation. Thank you, distinguished Carlo Caccia. And now the floor is given to Elnara Garagiozo from the Institute of Literature, the Nizami&Dante Institute of Literature, and she is gonna present the topic of water archetype in Nizami's Iskandername and Dante's Divine Comedy. You have to place it within 15 minutes time limits. I'm pleased to welcome the organizers and participants of the conference for arranging an important event for us. And the analysis reveal some very important issues, not only for today, but for the future, for multicultural values, for global values. What we're doing today is of a very high importance. My presentation, as you already know, is water archetype in Nizami's Iskandername and Dante's Divine Comedy. And these archetypes, they may be found in various national cultures. So they so both in Nizami and Dante, water archetype is very important. So actually, water archetype in global mythology is reflected this way or another. It's a very frequently used archetype. The legends of various peoples have that we have these four major archetypes of water, fire, air, and earth, and both in oral and written form. I would like to continue my presentation with the slides to make it more succinct and concise. The water archetype is very prevalent in the world mythology. It's one of the four major archetypes which is broadly used. We are speaking of four elements, but there is a fifth element which is called Akash. But the Oriental mythology confines itself with four. Nizami says that there are four major elements of human archetypes. So it found its way in the rituals, in customs, in cults, in rites, in Kitab-ı Gurgut, the epic poem of Azerbaijan. Water was considered the symbol of purity. Water was considered something sacred. There was sanctity of water, no stepping over the water, no desecration of water. And in Kitab-ı Gurgut, you can find it on a number of occasions. This also continued in the same vein in the mythology and in the epic stories of later periods. So in the Azerbaijani water archetype should be viewed in a broader context of Turkic archetypes. In Iskandername poem by Nizami, yes, it has some Turkic implications, but how about religious implications? It has a clear message that the world was created by water. The one who wants to question the fact that the world came from water, let him look at his flesh and see what it consists of. So the human flesh is, actually based on water, and therefore, how about Dante with his Divine Comedy, and what is the basis for mythological archetype of water in Dante's poem? It should be traced back to the Greek and Roman mythology, because in the infernal part of the comedy, there is Acheron, the river of Acheron, and the man named Charon, who is taking people from one bank of the river to another. And in Divine Comedy, we see the topic and the matter of a river. Odyssey has to move from one bank to another, from one side of the river to another, and he makes sacrifice on one bank of the river to move to the other side of the river. So here are the images and characters that are nurtured in the Greco-Roman mythology, and the Christian elements are very serious throughout his journey. Dante is accompanied by Virgil, which is a character that stands between the paganism and Christianity. And he actually notified of the appearance of the new prophet, Jesus. Therefore, the Christians treat him a little bit better than just an ordinary pagan. So, to enter the hell, you have to purify yourself with water. And he was given an opportunity to see the paradise, the inferno, but he had to wash himself in Lethe and another river, and that's how he gets the right to enter the hell. So when it comes to going to paradise, you also wash yourself in a river. And while Dante is led into the paradise, Virgil is not allowed to enter. He can accompany Dante in the inferno, but not in the paradise. So they part, and that's how they're and from that moment on, it's Beatrice who is accompanying Dante. To make my presentation short and make some conclusions, I would like to say that water archetype is found both in Iskandername of Nizami Ganjavi and Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy in a very broad way. Nizami Ganjavi, both Nizami and Dante trace this archetype into mythology and religion. So the roots are twofold: mythological and divine, religious. And the unity of mythology and religion is sort of reshaping the water archetype. Both in Iskandername and in Divine Comedy, the studies of water archetype indicates that these poems can be interpreted not only now but in future, because there are some elements that we may oversee today, and there are some researchers with encyclopedic level of knowledge that may discover new elements of these poems. And while we study these elements, we understand the unity of the world literature through archetypes. And well, we may have different national literatures, but they all share some values that boil down to the questions: who we are, why are we in this world, what is our mission? And with the universality of these values, both in written and oral, national or international or global literature, the quest for and the answer for these basic questions will be sought for by generations that are gone and by generations that are to come. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Elnara.
Contiguità e distanza. Averroisca il gran commento feo, Islamic culture and the theory of the origin of the soul in Dante, similarities and differences.
The next presenter is Alberto Granesi, who is gonna speak on Averroes, the Islamic culture and the theory of the origin of the soul of Dante, similarities and differences. Фахри, нет, я не слышу перевод на азербайджанский.
Grazie Marco Veglia e grazie naturalmente alla struttura virtuale a più alta densità letteraria.
If we are speaking of actual topical perspectives of Nizami, there is a very important leitmotif there, according to which, even though the daily scenery is described, there are some very important Islamic ideas and values that found their way to the poetry of Nizami. And of course, these works, the stories that are conveyed through these works and the authenticity of these stories clearly show that Nizami,
che naturalmente in modo particolare, anche tenendo conto della verosimiglianza almeno fantastica, comunque abbiamo in due casi esemplari. Per esempio, l'abbraccio che tra Dante e l'ombra di Casella è dichiarato impossibile nel canto secondo del Purgatorio, avviene invece tra Virgilio e Sordello nel canto sesto. Ebbene, Dante aveva per questo bisogno di appoggiarsi su delle similitudini, avendo in modo particolare
we are speaking of
basi sicure, tenendo presente che anche nella Bibbia, in un certo senso, sono previsti tornei.
In general, we see various issues typical for our life today. We understand that these are the events described in these works are typical for various generations. They happen in a repeated manner, and we fully understand that the literary works may play the role of a rescuer, of and the medieval aspects and issues. For instance, when Aristotle's works were translated into Latin, and once we studied them, we figured out that both on national level and global level, the theoretical knowledge is truly immense. And let's take the Orthodox Church. And we have a very clear explanation of a number of issues and guidelines that are important. And today we can say that these works of art are presented as divine senses, and people are expressing themselves through sentiments. The sentiments provide the guidelines for their behavior, and these has a very important theoretical value in shaping the human lives. So there are some very important issues and messages to be conveyed, and in various periods you try to create the links in between various historic periods. So today we are discussing the issues that emanate from the creative heritage of Dante, and we try to view them through theological, literary aspects, but we cannot only be confined to that. While the substantial issues of our life are expressed in these works, and in fact these classical works are inalienable from the literary heritage, because they constitute the moral basis of the values that we share today. And from this point of view, I would reiterate the extremely important elements in these works, and therefore with no personal responsibility, we can't make any step. We try to figure out the issues of, well, I cannot be the herald of justice unless I abide to what I preach. So these are very important sayings. So once we have these kind of approaches, and if we expose these kind of approaches, then we show that the behavior is bound with the sentiments that we're speaking about. And even in Aristotle's, in some philosophical treatises by Aristotle, was mentioned unis estis nomen, which means keeping the unity within human being is directly linked to its carnal feelings. So in a very clear way, as we see, this finds its way in Aristotle's works. So if today we are speaking of this or another phenomenon, and we try to rationalize the actions of human beings, we should take note of their wishes and their beliefs. And there is a vegetal form of feelings and sentiments, and then there is the way to materialize them. And as you know, the vegetal process in a mandatory way should display itself in human life. So you see that in various works, you see that the sentiments are shaping the behavior, and there are various forms of behavior. However, what stands in the core is the belief of humans. So you perceive yourself through the might and importance that you have. And if you have this perception, then you leave. Then if not, then you are not in existence anymore. So the studies of these problematics is therefore very important. So the sentiments after passing through vegetal phase are shaping the human behavior and materialize in this behavior. So altogether we understand that both poets created a special conditions, and this similarity could be numerous. So the philosophical aspects of Alberto, you have only 4 minutes left. So in conclusion of my presentation, I would like to emphasize the importance of human sentiments and feelings, the way they're presented in in this works. And I wanted to show that the very existence of human beings, it's a kind of substance that shape the behavior, and therefore the concept this concept constitutes one of the cornerstones of works by the poets in discussion and question, i.e. Nizami&Dante, and we see the element of reinforcement of the sentence that they try to convey. Alberto, we have only 3 more minutes before we move to the polemics and discussion and death, coming to death issue. So what happens to the spirit of humans when they move away from the real world, when they get above the material world? So in the past, the steps that were taken and the activities that were conducted, they shape the further situation with the spirit. And we can see the philosophical aspects that come into the play. And this is proven by the works. And there is another important aspect that I would like to touch upon, which is bound with philosophical doctrines, because even despite the fact that some people consider that more like a part of ideology, there is the idea of existence in philosophy, and this approach, this type of explanation, we come to an incredible conclusion, which is the following. Take any of the works by Dante or Nizami. Each of them in their activities, in their behavior, in their steps, we trace the philosophical ideas in a very clear manner. You can take any parameter of that, and that is really clear. So Alberto Matteo, analyzing the works by Dante, said that this is the foundation. The philosophical aspects of the book provide the foundation, and we can say that in the course of the researching this work, we see both philosophical and religious aspects as the key issue to discuss. While various researchers noted that Dante and actually well, he managed to matriculate some philosophical ideas, and there were some fundamental ideas standing behind each character, and in each of the poems, these can be found in a very clear manner. The participants, the characters are going through this, and in his various works, you can find that. And if we mention it today, the participants will agree with me that Dante's works, not only the works by Dante, not only poetry by Dante, well, he not only did he develop the vernacular, the popular language, but he managed to preserve and enrich the poetic traditions that existed before him, enrich them and convey them to the generations to come, because as it is the case with Nizami, in various expressions and metaphors, he laid the very appropriate foundation for and the legacy to be conveyed to the generations to come. And with that, he managed to deliver the most sacred feelings based on values. Thank you for your presentation, Alberto. And now, distinguished participants, the panelists, well, we have only several minutes left for polemics between the panelists, and in fact, these presentations made certain synergy with each other, and they were kind of building on each other. Someone wanted to make some introductions or comments.
So my question has to do with the use of words and the power the words have to convey a divine meaning. So we heard in some of the other presentations, discussion of archetypes, stones, water. Water comes up appears again in Paradise when Dante actually sees God face to face and the divine court. But in Dante, seeing a river, quoting a river to convey the idea of the divine court where God is the king, is a misleading human translation into the human mind of a spectacle that goes beyond the human. So Dante sees a river, but then he realizes that it was only the easiest way for a human to recognize what he saw. The reality goes beyond the image of the river, goes beyond the word for river. So my question is, how much the words that you mentioned, the pearl, the necklace, are considered in the linguistic theory of the time to be able to convey this divine meaning. Are they real? Are they limited? Is there the same sense of limitedness of the human language? Or do words can just communicate the exact meaning, the divine nature of the highest spheres?
Non so se ci sono altre domande, oltre all'intervento di Alberto Gabriele. Se non ci sono altri interventi, chiedo a se
if there are no other questions, I will give floor to Nunzio, who will sum up our panel today. Whom was the question addressed, to Elnara Garagosova or to the first speaker, to Aydin Talibzadeh? Whom was the question addressed to? The question
Professor Talibzadeh, yeah.
Whom was the question addressed to, please?
Professor Talibzadeh, I don't know how to pronounce it.
Birinci mən Alberto Gabriele'ye teşekkür ederim ki bu sualı bana verdi.
Thank you for this question. What I meant, I was speaking of effect of a rose, effect of a gasser, or effect of the pearl and Javar effect in Iskandername. What is the matter is that both the rose and the pearl and the castle and and any other or the stranger, they all have a hidden meaning that is to be revealed. The rose is a secret of the Lord. The Lord is so deep and wise and profound and so perfect that out of nowhere, by mixing water with earth, he creates a masterpiece like a rose out of water and seed and soil. So and these rose can be interpreted in a huge number of ways. And in Sufi esoterics, it's inscribed. The same holds true with the pearl. In Khosrow and Shirin, Mirvari is a prayer. And the prayer is a balance of the uniform, of the universe created by the Lord. And we get back to these good word, good deed, good intent by the Zoroastrians. So the prayer is bringing together this trinity of good intent, good word, good deed. And therefore, the prayers that we balance our universe through are compared to the pearl, and these pandemics that distorted these pearls and this necklace destroyed the hierarchy on which the world is based. And the same holds true with other effects. I'm not going to take too much of your time, but the answer to the question is that yes, there is a meaning beyond the word. And thank you, Alberto, for raising this question. We could spend hours. Well, archetypes, coming to archetypes, Dante and Nizami tried to develop the archetypes. they tried to, well, that's the whole separate issue to discuss, but thank you for raising the question. So, we have only several minutes left, and maybe you could write some questions to each other using chat function, or share your details so that whenever you have any other additional questions. So let's sum up this session. I thank all the participants. Thank you, Nunzio Noceri, for selecting me the chairperson of this particular session. Thank you very much, and see you at the next panel. Все нормально.
Grazie a voi, grazie a te, a tutti.
Ciao Marco, ciao.
Ciao Marco.
Ciao Rino, ciao, ciao.
Very great, thanks to you.